Planning and Zoning Commission for the Village of Vernon Hills. We need to start with a roll call.
Chairman Morris,
Here.
Commissioner Baloo,
Present.
Commissioner Cotton,
Here.
Commissioner Hesner,
Here.
Commissioner Heidner,
Here.
Commissioner Mulcrone,
Present.
Commissioner Gorog. We have one.
Okay, this evening we have consideration of public hearing for case number 1408, which is a petition filed by the Village of Vernon Hills requesting amendments to the Code of Ordinances, specifically 1, to amend Article 3, Section 3.2 definitions by adding a new definition, residential driveway overlay district. Secondly, to amend Article 19, 19.5.1, residential driveway and driveway entrance design and location, and approving any other amendments to the zoning ordinance deemed necessary and appropriate by the Board of Trustees relating to these proposed amendments. Okay. I guess we have Mr. Atkinson here who's going to tell us about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The village board has discussed this topic over several meetings throughout the year. And this discussion resulted from feedback they received from residents in the area that wanted more parking. And that area, as shown on the map, is the area on Deer Path, bounded by Sullivan Drive to the north and Route 45 to the south. What's unique about this area is it's the only street that we're aware of that doesn't allow daytime parking on the street. For obvious reasons, it's a busier street and it's not wide enough to accommodate the parking of on-street cars. So the board, as I stated, discussed this on a number of occasions, most recently at its October 7th meeting. At that meeting, staff had prepared draft regulations as directed by the board that would allow certain properties within this area to have a wider driveway. In the draft regulations that the board reviewed and that are before you tonight, I can summarize for you. For the properties located within the area that's shown on your map, for certain properties that have a shorter length driveway that would be 33 feet or less, those properties would be allowed to have a driveway width of 27 feet. Normally, or currently, the zoning code allows a driveway width that is no wider than the width of the garage, which is typically between 20 and 24 feet in that area. So this regulation would allow a wider driveway, 27 feet, again, for the shorter length driveways. The problem with the shorter length driveways is they can't park cars in tandem front to back in a lot of cases without overhanging the public sidewalk. So what they've been doing is parking on the approach and or anything else, sometimes on the grass a little, and anything else they can do to squeeze their cars in there. So I can show you some examples. Now this one here, which is 100 South Deer Path, as you can tell, it's got a detached garage and the driveway's on the north side of the driveway. So that driveway is approximately 64 feet long. They would not qualify for the wider driveway of 27 feet. The next example, 110 Deer Path, this has a shorter length driveway. This one is a little bit over 24 feet wide. So this one would qualify. That garage is approximately 24 feet wide, so they get an extra 3 feet of width on their driveway. Now, how would they widen that driveway? They'd have two options. They can go towards their side property line, but have to maintain a minimum 5-foot setback, or they could go into the interior or the front of the property to get that width. In some cases, for properties on Deer Path, particularly those that are raised ranch design, there'd need to be a retaining wall or something along those lines because of the grading conditions that are particular for those sites. The next example we have is 113 South Deer Path. This property would comply. It has approximately an 18-foot long driveway. This is a good example where you can see where they're really limited with their parking, and they certainly couldn't get cars on there parked in tandem. The next example, 119 Deer Path, you can see the garage is set back from the front face of the building. This is about a 40-foot long driveway. They would not qualify for the wider width driveway. 205 Deer Path. Again, this one would not comply. you can see the garage, which is set back from the front face of the building. Here's another shorter length driveway that would comply. So, again, now going back to the regulations, what we've done is, when I say we, I mean staff, is we've created amendments to the zoning code that creates an overlay district. And that overlay district is defined, and it's represented on the map in front of you. And then in the Chapter 19 of the zoning code that establishes driveway width regulations, we proposed some text language that would grant an exemption for properties located within this overlay district having a driveway width of 33 feet or less. In those instances, those properties could have a 27-foot wide driveway. And what we did as staff, once we received the feedback from the board, was we went through, we did an exercise by going through and seeing which driveways have those shorter lengths. In other words, they don't have the garage, which is set back from the front face of the house, or they don't have a garage, which is detached. Figured out what the shorter length driveway setbacks are, because those were the driveways the board was recommending to have a wider driveway, and arrived at a dimension of 33 feet. So, again, those the draft regulations are before you. We're available to answer any questions that you have. And then just to summarize again what the board directed, they directed that these draft regulations be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a public hearing. Once the Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation, then this item would be forwarded back to the village board for final consideration.
And just one quick note, we did send a letter to residents on Deer Path in the impacted area, proposed impacted area. So we did have a specific letter advising them of this public hearing and this location. So I just want to make sure that that was aware, since traditionally with text amendments, public notice simply needs to go out and be notified in the proper channels. And in this particular instance, we did notify the residents that were proposed to be impacted.
I'm just going to work through some comments real quick. So there's 52 houses total that you've identified, but only 35 houses would be able to have this.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct, yes.
And of those 35 houses, how many people, those residents, have actually come forward and contacted the village to have this potentially done?
Well, board members, I don't know the exact number. Nobody has contacted me or at staff level. I don't believe Joe either, and either one of us would have gotten those calls. But the comments at the board level was that they received feedback. And based on that, they started discussing it at the committee of the whole meetings and began directing staff to put together draft regulations.
I guess the other question is, of those 35 houses, they do have, I'm assuming, 2-car garages and at least 2-car spaces outside of their house. So they have parking for 4 already.
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, that's a good point. I think some of the issues involved with some of these properties are a couple of things. And probably a number of us have experienced this. Kids get older, they get a driver's license, and the next thing you know, you have another car. And then that's combined with, where are we going to store all this stuff? And there's a large number of properties on Deer Path that don't have a basement, so they tend to use their garage for storage. In some cases, a lot of the garage is used for storage, so that certainly does contribute to the problem.
Okay.
Also, a lot of the houses that you think have 2-car garages on the inside really aren't, especially the tri-levels. A lot of those are eaten up by the configuration of the basement. And when you see the garage door open, you'll see that let's say the one side of the garage is really only like a half a space, because there's walls that are existing in those designs. So really, they only have, basically, it's like a 1.5-car garage, even though it looks like a double door. So some of those people could be limited to 3 spaces. So.
Why are we limiting this just to houses on Deer Path? I know I live in Deer Path, and I can only fit 2 cars in my driveway without overhanging onto the sidewalk. I understand that during the day people can park on the street by me. However, it doesn't accommodate for overnight parking.
Well, that's certainly something the Planning and Zoning Commission could discuss if you wanted to recommend these regulations to be beyond the map that's in front of you. It was the board's determination that they wanted to limit this allowance to two conditions. One, that you're on a street that doesn't allow overnight parking. I'm sorry, that doesn't allow daytime parking. That's the case with Deer Path. And two, if you have a short length driveway. So it was the board's consensus was to limit those number of properties that could have a wider driveway, but certainly the Planning and Zoning Commission could discuss allowing this over a wider area of the village.
I also know that there are some portions of, is it, gosh, look at the map and see what the street is. It's not labeled. The street between 200 and 126. Deer Path, that there are an area in there that does not allow street parking, I believe, or might only allow it on one side of the street.
That could be, it's probably one side. There are a number of areas in the village where parking's allowed on one side, and that very well could be the case for this, which I believe is either Monterey, I think it's Monterey, yeah.
Thank you. Because there's also other streets such as Monterey and DeBille and Linden that people can park on from Deer Path.
That's correct. They could park on those streets and then walk to the property on Deer Path if they were a guest. That's correct.
Why does the general zoning code limit the width of driveways?
The intent is to maintain a certain level of green space, in particular within a front yard. The zoning code doesn't have a maximum impervious limitation, so it limits impervious surfaces a little differently. It limits the width of the driveway.
Don't certain neighborhoods, I know in Centennial Crossing where I live, we have maximum impervious coverage on our lots, and we don't have overnight parking on our streets either.
Yeah, what neighborhood do you? Which neighborhood are you?
Centennial.
In yeah. I misspoke earlier. They wanted to allow it where they don't allow overnight parking there as well?
No.
Okay, thank you.
The aprons are going to remain the same on these. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
The aprons will remain the same width, so the curb cuts don't change?
That's correct. It'd be 20 feet at the property line or the public sidewalk and 24 feet at the curb line. Oh, getting back to the previous question about overnight parking, I misspoke. They don't allow daytime parking on the street on Deer Path on the map that's shown. Just to clarify that.
Do we have an idea, maybe only it's a gross approximation, that if we looked at the pictures that you showed and then we look at this map, how this would kind of come out if we started making piles? How many of these lots would the additional driveway width be in front of the house versus how many could be accommodated effectively in the side yard? Some of the pictures I know you showed, they were in the side yard, and I think one was in front of it. Do we have any idea how that would kind of balance out?
Instinctively, well, based on this, this property is zoned R5, minimum side yard setback is 7 feet.
Right.
And I'm making some presumptions, but
Yeah.
a lot of the buildings there are going to be somewhere close to that 7 feet. There might be some that have 10 or 8 or 11, and so there might be some properties that could extend the width to a certain degree towards the side property line. But I think it's reasonable to assume that a lot of the extensions will be the opposite, will be into the front yard.
From a planning perspective, and maybe this is really should go to Joe, is it something that the village wants to encourage the additional impervious surface in front of the houses, so in the front yard versus the side yard for parking? And I know that puts you on the spot, so I apologize on one level, but also I don't.
And I understand on one level.
Right.
On another level also. You know, as a whole, I don't think the village has contemplated that, and I don't think the village would be ready to have a stance one way or another. The particular stance as it relates to Deer Path, I believe that it would be acceptable due to the prohibition on daytime parking, and also because of the width of the driveway.
Fair enough. If these text amendments were passed, this would become an as-of-right type of zoning. However, currently, isn't this something that could be a variance to ZBA if someone wanted an expanded driveway?
Currently, it could be,
Okay.
yes.
Have we dealt with any through ZBA?
I have not received a request in the 8 years that I've been here. I can say at least that much.
Okay. Is there I'm going to say this kind of in the abstract. Is there a problem kind of setting, I don't want to say a policy or a precedent at the village, but an understanding at the village that if someone sought a variance here, it would be treated a little bit differently than if someone seeks a variance, like, by way of example, my house where I can get 4 cars in my driveway? You know, that it would be treated differently. So why couldn't this be treated as a ZBA issue versus a text amendment?
I believe that was a policy decision that the board made.
Fair enough.
Certainly during the discussions at the committee of the whole, it was referenced that the ZBA was an option that currently residents could take.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, anybody else?
Going that route, does the petitioner have additional expenditures that he wouldn't under this? Is there any application type fee that a resident would have to pay to do the ZBA process?
Yeah, there's, for residential, it's $350. So, to answer your question, to apply for a variation.
And part of that cost, I do believe, is due to the public notice that would be required to go out and the letters that would be sent to help accommodate for staff time.
So that might be a reason that they would encourage this change to the ordinance versus
In this
having everybody
particular
go through
overlay
ZBA.
district, yes.
Okay, anybody else?
Just a civil engineering question. Let's say a bunch of residents decided to do this. Was it looked at by the city engineer to determine the increased impervious surface and during like a storm event of how much that might contribute to the sewer system?
Our our village engineer did review the proposal and plans. There was no comment in either way whether or not this would impact stormwater.
Because I know the new stormwater mandate is a lot more restrictive than it has been in the past. So.
I think the thing that makes this logical is that it's a very unique condition within the community. I don't know of any other that's like this. And by limiting this to an overlay district for just these lots, it inherently makes sense. And if anybody's traveled down this road at night in the summertime specifically, sometimes in the wintertime, but it seems like more in the summertime, you see these cars parked in the aprons all over the place. And frankly, it's kind of dangerous. Sometimes you think there's a car there. Well, there is a car there, but you're not sure if it's, running or not. And it's somewhat confusing for people if you're traveling through the neighborhood.
Are you talking the ones that are parked
Parallel.
normally
Parallel
or
parallel
parallel
with
to
the
the street?
street.
Yeah.
Right. It's just odd. So, and for all the other neighborhoods, for the neighborhoods that I've traveled in, because I live in Deer Path, I haven't noticed an overnight parking issue for most of those vehicles. I mean, it's unique when there is a house that has more than four cars that can't be accommodated on the site. So that's why the uniqueness of this, after viewing it and looking at it all, it seems really logical on what they're trying to accomplish. The thing that is also very compelling, though, is it will be hard to accomplish this on many of the sites. You know, with the role of the contour of the front yard, it will be expensive for these homeowners to create this potential additional parking space. So, to a degree, it allows some freedom, but to another degree, it's going to be very costly to get it.
Okay. Anything else?
And there's no ordinance against the parallel parking on the apron to the drive,
That's correct.
to the roadway.
There's an ordinance against, blocking the public sidewalk, thereby the parallel parking on the approach, but.
Okay. This is a public hearing, and therefore, if anybody wants to speak with respect to this request to amend two provisions of the Code of Ordinances, this would be the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Pete.
Good to meet you and good input. I'm Jay Killinger. I live at 107 Deer Path Drive. My house would be one of the ones that would not be affected by this ordinance. I have a long driveway. However, my neighbor has a short driveway. Okay, I've lived at 107 Deer Path for 39 years. I've seen it all. I've lived there before it was a through street. I've lived there when I could park on the street. I've lived there when they reconstructed Deer Path and took a foot away from each side. And even before that, was when they they banned parking, daytime parking. I even got a ticket there one time for parking in front of my own house. Didn't know at the time. Anyway, I have great sympathy for the residents on South Deer Path Drive. I'm not here to oppose this, but per se. I had instances when my sons came home from college and brought girlfriends home, and I had 6 cars on my driveway and 2 in the garage, and mine was one of the ones in the garage. I had to move 3 cars onto DeBille Court in order to get my car out. So there are ways of getting around this, okay? You mentioned the side parking and the issues with that. Commissioner Bello, to correct you a little bit, those houses on that, by that builder on that street, do not all have 2-car garages. None of them have a 2-car front, but half of it taken up by a family room or something. That's by a different builder on the other street. Anyway, I think part of the issues that have been generated by the residents is some of the second-class citizen feeling that we have by our police department. Our police department will come by, and because they go down Deer Path Drive all the time, they will see cars parked across the sidewalk, and they will either issue them a warning or a citation. Now, I feel we get picked on because of that, and I don't have to do that. But the residents get picked on because I know my neighbor has a shorter driveway. He was warned or ticketed for that, and I know others that have had the same issue. The problem is when I go for walks with my wife and go to other neighborhoods and I see cars parked across the sidewalks, they don't ever get ticketed, and they have plenty of room. Perhaps the issue could be resolved, as well as the parking parallel to the street, if you could give a allowance or deviation for us to park across the sidewalk. Now, I think we're allowed to do that during during overnight parking, are we not?
No, the ordinance doesn't allow obstructing the public sidewalk
At
at any
any
time
time?
during the day.
Okay, thank you for correcting that. Anyway, my real concern is, like I said, I have sympathy for the residents, but I also have some concerns as far as if the 34 different houses that are eligible for having this done, and each one of these houses decide to do that, how much are they really going to gain? One parking spot. That's it. It won't solve their problems when they have guests for parties, graduations, whatever, weekend parties. It's not going to resolve that issue. They still have to go park on DeBille Court or some other side street. You showed the one house up there at 110 South Deer Path, which is directly across the street from me. They have two driveways. That was the original builder, Mike Podekar. And we used to build our subdivision, my house. And he put in two driveways. You said it had a 24-foot driveway on the left side, and you could only go 3 foot. But on the other side, he's got like another 10-foot driveway where we can park like 3 different cars. So I'm not sure that's the person that inquired about it or not. So I don't think this particular amendment is going to resolve the real issue at hand. And the real problem that I have with, if this gets passed, is, maybe you can correct me, but the letter says, the amendment talks about a 5-foot setback requirement. And I think, Mr. Atkinson, you mentioned 7 foot?
The homes are required to be set back from the side property line 7 feet. The driveway is 5 feet.
Okay. My concern is and the board also discussed which direction is this home builder going to put this additional concrete or asphalt jungle? Is it going to be in front of his house? No. He's going to be on the side of the house, towards encroaching into his neighbor. Not actually encroaching into the neighbor, but towards his neighbor. And I think that, if that was going to happen to me, my neighbor, I'd be a little ticked off. I don't want to look at his additional third car. Now, in my particular case, my neighbor runs a business out of his house. He's got his garage stacked wall to wall, ceiling to floor with boxes. He's got 2 cars. He can only fit 2 cars in his garage and in his driveway. 2 cars in his driveway. He's got people visiting from China. They don't know any better. They park across the sidewalk, or they park parallel to the street. And I would be quite upset if they took the 5-foot additional from the edge of his house and made an additional side, and it's going to go over towards my driveway, and I'd have to look at that asphalt jungle or concrete jungle, whichever he decides to build, and I have to look at that all the time. So my concern is, again, I have to stress, I have sympathy for these residents. I'm one of these residents. But I think if you're going to do this, and I think the board, some members have also mentioned about, is this a reality, or is this some kind of a pipe dream for some of these people? Because I think many of these people don't really, are not really going to do this. For the expense versus the gain. But I think we need to, and we talked about a ordinance variation, I think you need to enforce that type of ordinance variation. If somebody wanted to, if this were to proceed, you should also include language that requires a variation that gets proposed and properly administered, and neighbors and within a certain radius have to be informed and sign off on it. So that's my feelings about this whole situation. I don't think it's a pipe dream, but I sure don't want to see that neighborhood becoming an asphalt and concrete jungle if all 34 properties decide to do this. It takes away from the aesthetics and also the property values. maybe you can put parking back on Deerfield Road, Deer Path Drive, but I doubt that'll ever happen. Okay, but maybe on one side, who knows? But thank you very much for listening to me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments, maybe? Okay. What we have on this commission is a standing motion to recommend approval. So what it would be a motion to recommend approval of the text amendment to Article 3, Section 3.2 definitions, to add the definition for residential driveway overlay district, and the text amendment to Article 19, Section 19.5.1, with respect to the exception for properties within that district with driveways having a length of less than 33 feet may have a maximum width of 27 feet for their driveway. Is that what we're looking for? Okay. So we need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion before we vote?
My only concern with this, I guess, is beyond the aesthetics, is that that those houses are, how old is your house?
Built in 76, 38 years.
So they're approaching 40 years old, and this has never come up before. So that's I don't know why all of a sudden it's an urgency.
I have a similar concern, is that I agree that there are unique conditions faced by the homes on Deer Path south of Sullivan. However, that unique condition, I think, as we've just heard, has not just occurred. It's been there since they were built, or at least since the street became a no parking street. As a result of that, and the fact that we've heard that the village has not had requests or even inquiries, it sounds like, to the building department with respect to expanding parking for individual homeowners, I'm not sure that a text amendment is really addressing a need so much as just amending a zoning code. Lastly, the gentleman who spoke regarding where these driveways would go, I'm both in agreement and disagreement with. I'm in agreement with that, yes, it's going to change the character. I guess I'm in disagreement to the extent that if you have a lot wide enough that it comfortably fits in a side yard, I'd feel more comfortable having it there than having it in front of the house, where we just have effectively, in some of the examples, large swaths of parking in front of residences, which I think will substantially change the character of the neighborhood and the character of this street. Okay. Anybody else? If not, I guess it's time to vote.
Commissioner Blue?
Yes.
Commissioner Cotton?
No.
Commissioner Hesner?
Yes.
Commissioner Heidner?
Reluctant, yes.
Commissioner Mulcron?
No.
Commissioner Gorog? Chairman Morris?
No.
So that motion is 3 yeses, 3 nos, and 1 absent. So,
Just for purposes of my statement, I would like to see this question addressed where the need is brought to the village by an individual resident by way of the variance process. And I know that there are mechanisms by which we can even waive fees. And I think it'd be better on a case-by-case basis as where these go versus just a carte blanche as of right 27-foot driveway if you have less than 33 feet in length. And I think that it's something that could still be addressed through the building department and through staff to the satisfaction of residences, which would then, I think, also address questions that the neighbors would be involved in that versus just someone one day coming in and saying, here's my big driveway.
And I do have a comment on that as well. I honestly believe that the change from a 20 to 27 or 24 to 27 foot wide driveway is not that large, and it will happen very infrequently. The expense will be a deterrent. But I think as far as the need for it, the number of cars that park parallel with the street on the aprons at night is something that it is problematic. And I think that you will see people coming in for this as they have been the ones who have been ticketed or warned from time to time. So I think the need is kind of indirect. The need is there because you see the cars parking parallel on these aprons. It's kind of a passive representation of need. And I think that this is really a good option for these homeowners who might not have another option.
Okay, anybody else?
I'm not sure that 3 feet would make a difference. I think that people would still be parking on the apron on Deer Path. So, I mean, that was one of the factors I considered.
And just for your information, so this is a recommendation that will go before the committee of the whole at the next village board meeting on December 16th. That's Tuesday at 7 p.m. Immediately following the village board meeting. I'll give you my card so that if you'd like to attend as well. Otherwise, if you want to put written comments, the minutes will also be included as well as the findings to the village board in a memo format, so that your comments as well as those of the commission will also be taken into consideration.
Okay, this evening, looks like we have no development review. Anything we need to be aware of upcoming?
Yeah, so there's 2 items currently before a technical review. One was just submitted today. It's for the Oaks. They're expanding and requesting a rezoning of, it's the triangle piece of property that's currently B1 that's along Route 45. They're looking to expand the existing apartment buildings to that portion of the property. So that is beginning the technical review process. Given that they have gone through all these steps before and they're not making any changes to the building structure, and primarily it's going to be a question of site layout in terms of parking and configuration of access to the entrance drive. I would suspect that the technical review will not be a long process and would expect that to go to a public hearing in January. In addition to that, we are just receiving technical review responses back from staff regarding the College of Lake County's proposed expansion for a single-story chemistry lab / classroom. That one I do anticipate there being several more revisions that will take place prior to this going before the public hearing. I would ask what your preference would be as to whether or not you'd like us to put 2 items on the agenda, or if you'd prefer to take each meeting, have 1 meeting to handle each item separately. If there's a preference, let me know. I can make sure that we can kind of coordinate that better as we move forward. But just want to throw that out there if there is a feeling.
Is it easier for you if we do them as 2 separate versus you coming and leaving halfway through?
I'm okay with leaving halfway through.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
I can heckle my client.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay. All right, anything else we need to know? Then I think we just have to approve the minutes of the October 22nd, 2014 meeting, which are in our packets. Unless anyone has any changes to it, we have a standing motion to approve. We need a
I'll
second.
second.
Okay, we can do that by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Okay, so I guess it's 4 ayes and 2 abstains and 1 absent. Okay, if there's nothing else, I guess it's have a happy holiday, and we have a motion to adjourn. We need a second.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed to that? So we're adjourned.
Well, everyone, Merry Christmas.